Okay, any more questions from students here? Yes, back there.
Hi, my name's Kate McDonough. I'm a senior and studying politics. And I was just wondering, you talked about the divisiveness between the parties within Congress, and a lot of the people that I've talked to, not necessarily politics students, just average students or not even students at all, I see a similar divisiveness within just people themselves and people who might vote. And I was wondering, and especially with this whole, Bush for the past 8 years, a lot of people see him just in the media, how he's represented as very unsuccessful and very unpopular, almost like voting for Bush is uncool, and they associate the Republican Party with that. How do you suggest, because I imagine that this is a very sort of detrimental thing to our government, because being on two opposite sides and not agreeing on anything won't get us anywhere. So how do you suggest not only overcoming it in Congress, but even just the people of the nation trying to work together and not just automatically be like, you're a Democrat, so everything you say is stupid, or you're a Republican, so everything you say is wrong?
It's a really big and important question, and I don't pretend to have a very good or easy answer to that, but I appreciate your asking it. Remember what I said at the outset, when I said that I thought that one of the things that's lacking today, not only in Congress but in our society, is a lack of civility. Although Peggy Noonan wrote an article this last weekend in which she said it's not civility. You can always say my esteemed colleague and then say ugly things about them after that, so you've fulfilled the civility. She says it's graciousness, grace she called it, and graciousness that people show to each other. It's not only in Congress, it's in society as a whole where we lack that. The way we treat each other, treat people on the streets. I was mentioning the lack of respect for authority figures, whether it's school teachers or whether it's police or anything like that. I am stunned by the bumper stickers that you see today about political leaders, about the president. And I was stunned on the other side about Clinton. And I think it's really been in the last decade where using obscenities on bumper stickers to describe the president of the United States, I just find that appalling that anybody would actually go around with all that kind of thing on their car there. No matter what you think of the president as a person, what you think of him as a political leader and his policies, he is the president of the United States, whether it's Bill Clinton, whether it's George Bush. And you respect that because you respect the office, because you respect the institution, because you respect the Constitution of the United States. And so you respect the office itself. Doesn't seem to be any of that much anymore, whether it's in little, not very much of it in Congress, and certainly not very much of it in society as a whole. How do we go about changing that? You start changing it right in your families and the way you raise children and how you teach them to respect other people, different points of view, diversity, tolerance for people of different faiths, creeds, races, and different political points of view.
I want to interject here with an issue question because I want to be sure we ask you about this. And that's the question of trade and globalization, which is something we haven't talked about with other members. And this is really an area where you've been an activist yourself.
And I'm going to be teaching a course in trade and globalization at the University of Arizona Business and Law School this next fall.
Well, even better. So we'll give you some practice right here. The issue of globalization is going to be very important to all of these young people here as they enter the work market and to all of our future generations. And you have been a big believer in lowering trade barriers and in what is called free trade, which seemed to be gaining popularity during President Clinton, a Democrats administration, with the passage of NAFTA and so forth. Now you've had a Republican government, as you say, for 6 years, with Republicans controlling every part of the government. And yet, number one, you don't hear as much talk about the benefits of globalization, if there are such benefits. There's, of course, disagreement about that. And number two, you haven't seen as much real action in that area on the part of the Congress as one might have expected with Republicans at the helm. So I guess the first question is, why do you think that is? Why has trade and free trade become a more complicated issue for your own party?
Well, on one hand, we've run out of steam. We've just run out of steam on this thing, and we've pushed it, and people are just not convinced that it's really bringing the benefits that they saw. The second reason that I would cite is that you mentioned it, globalization. It used to be fairly simple. When you're talking about trade, you could say, okay, we're going to trade this, they're going to send this to us, we're going to send this to them, we're going to have these kinds of exports, and who's going to benefit from this? Now it's a much more complicated thing because we're talking about outsourcing, and not outsourcing for manufactured products, but outsourcing for services, for all kinds of things that are being outsourced. We live in a world that is truly global. And Thomas Friedman has said that you can, in this world of globalization, you can run, it's like running a 100-yard dash. You run it, and as soon as you finish, you have to run it again. And you never stop. It just keeps having to be run over and over again. And I think people just run out of steam when it comes to that. But if we don't run it, those over there that are going to be running that race again and again, and whether it's the Chinese or whether it might be the Spaniards or whoever it might be, are going to keep running that, and they're going to run right over us if we don't do it. So you've got to keep running in the race of globalization. But as to why we've done it, I think if people have just got tired of the thing. Why has it happened, particularly in this administration? Bush has been good on trade. He's promoted some very good trade agreements, and I think his people have been very good on the multilateral round, the so-called Doha round, which is the big push. But I just think that we can go into all the things about what's happened in the Doha negotiations as to why we have failed to achieve that. But there is not the will on the part of either the developing countries or the developed countries to do it. Trade used to be so much simpler. We used to be talking about a handful of countries, and we're talking about manufactured goods. Now we're talking about services. We're talking about complex stuff, that financial things. We're talking about intellectual property. We're talking about all of these things are involved in this. Subsidies that are involved in agriculture and things that we'd never have talked about before. So it's infinitely more complicated, and there's 150 members with Vietnam coming in this year, in this month. There's 150 members now of the World Trade Organization. And you have to have a consensus among every one of those 150 members to accomplish anything.
But in terms of our own country's even understanding of the issue and preparing in any way for what is, it seems inevitable, that is, as you've just pointed out, the globalization of services and intellectual property and every possible component of workplace competition, how well do you think that the legislative branch is equipped to begin addressing the effects, the inevitable effects of these kinds of changes in the world?
We're not. We're not well equipped to do it, and I've been puzzling about that, and it's one of the things I hope to address in this talk, as in my course rather, is how are we going to address those things? Because I think the legislative process is the poorest possible place to address something as complex as this, and yet most of the issues require legislative solutions, or at least part of it has to be done through a legislative solution. So I don't have an easy answer to that one.
Another honest answer. A man who says he doesn't have an answer. Jake, how about you?
Hi, Congressman. My name's Jake. I'm a senior here in history and politics. And I was just wondering that, because over the past few elections, we've seen the moderates get pushed out, the extreme wings of the party get power, and a decrease in the number of voters who choose to identify with the party. Do you think that if these trends continue, we're going to see a viable third party or independent candidate in the coming elections?
No. I'll give you a little bit more of an answer than that. No, these are trends that come and go. I mean, if you look at this election, you begin to see maybe the rebirth of a centrist element within the Democratic Party. Certainly a lot of the Democrats that were elected are much more at the center than they have been before. It'll be interesting to see whether that translates into the presidential race or not. But in the Congress, you certainly begin to see that growth of that centrist element within the Democratic Party. So as the Republicans lose their moderate and center wing, the Democrats seem to pick it up. So it may be a trend moving towards the Democrats, since they'll have this center here. Why don't I think there will be a third party? We have a long established history of two parties in this country, and people are comfortable with the idea of two parties. And when we have a way of dealing with it. When one gets completely out of line, we punish it. For years, the Democratic Party was in the throes of being the very liberal Democrats controlling the party, and time and again, the voters punished them at the polls, whether it was in Congress, but most notably in the presidential elections, with punishing people like George McGovern and people like that were nominated. And so people say, no, this guy's just too far over there. We're not going to vote for that kind of person. And so they turn away. And eventually the party, as the Democrats are doing now, tends to come back a bit towards the middle. I think the Republicans will tend to do that eventually, whether it's this year, or this next election cycle, or 2 or 3 election cycles from now. But interestingly enough, look at all the presidential nominees that are, or possible presidential candidates that are out there. With the exception of this morning's announcement by Senator Brownback that he's going to announce and he's going to push the social conservative issues. All of them are centrist. On the Republican side, you're looking at Giuliani, you're looking at McCain, you're looking at Mitt Romney, even Gingrich on policy stuff. I mean, he doesn't have that reputation, but on policy stuff is very practical and centrist. On this healthcare stuff that he's been doing with Clinton and stuff is very centrist kind of stuff there. So, I mean, and on the Democratic side, you've got Hillary Clinton, who voted for the war and has not backed off from that. You have John Edwards, maybe there, but the others, Birch Bayh, Governor Velasic, they're very centrist kinds of people that are there. So I think you're looking at what I see as the most centrist elements in both parties right now. It'll be interesting to see who the nominees are, and I'll make my prediction. I think it's going to be McCain and Clinton.
Thank you.
Risky prediction.
Be quite a race, though, won't it? Oh, that'll be a fun one to watch.